Welcome to the Wife of Violence podcast, where we dive deep into topics of personal growth, passion, and leadership, all with violence on our mind. I'm Amber, I'm the wife.
I am Ryan, I'm the violence.
And this morning we both woke up and chose violence.
Every day.
Still.
Still.
Well, everyone, you have actually just heard the last Wife of Violence podcast intro. We are actually pivoting to a new brand name with bigger opportunities for growth. We have truly enjoyed our time bringing you the Wife of Violence podcast, but as we've talked about, sometimes your first plan A has to give way to something new. So on that note, welcome to the second Plan A podcast, where we dive deep into the art of navigating life's twists, turns, and sucker punches. I'm Amber Hoover. I'd rather stick to the plan.
I'm Ryan Hoover, and I didn't know there was a plan.
So today we are moving to our second Plan A. On this episode, we are...
You keep saying things.
On this
This is all background. You don't even need to concern yourself.
Sure, yeah. For those listening, you might be confused right now. That's okay. When you're done driving, come watch.
It's okay. Amber is too.
True. On this episode, we are tossing blame and ego to the curb in an attempt to regain control of, well, everything we can control.
Put Deadpool right there.
Hello, Deadpool. Welcome to the podcast. That would be crazy. Are you ready?
If you stay ready.
You don't have to get ready. I dig it. All right. So as I got into the research here...
Wait, what are we talking about?
You're supposed to know this time. There is no plan. Can we have a second Plan A if there's no plan at all?
It's all second Plan A's.
Ego versus accountability.
Okay. Got it.
As I got into the research, I immediately noticed an important contrast between, well, there was a duality, if you will, between holding someone accountable and being accountable. Those are different things. And it made me think of empowerment. I know. If I want someone to be empowered, I can't empower them. That's not
Are
how that
you
works.
sure? Because every martial arts ad on the planet says otherwise. Every 2-hour self-defense seminar says otherwise. Are you sure you know what you're talking about?
You are correct, and I am still sure.
Call me skeptical.
In much the same way, if I want someone to be accountable, I can't actually hold them accountable. And I think that term gets thrown around a lot. Hold this person accountable. Hold them accountable. But the reality is they are the only ones who can decide to be accountable, to take accountability for something.
Yeah. But I think the difference there is I can draw your attention to maybe some actions or behaviors that you're unaware of that can then put you in a situation where you have the choice of choosing accountability or not. Because sometimes people just don't know. You know, they don't realize that they are doing things that are causing strife in their lives or somebody else's life. And I think the hold them accountable thing is not grammatically accurate, but that doesn't mean that I shouldn't point it out to them.
Right.
You know, let them know. And then what they do with that is that's where you get into the accountability part.
Right.
What they do with that information is up to them.
When they make that choice.
Right.
And so the podcast episode title is Ego versus Accountability. And, you know, ego is not a bad term necessarily. That's
everybody
your
has
sense
ego.
Of self. Yeah, everybody has it.
It's taken on a negative connotation though.
Right. Because it's been coined mostly as self-importance rather than ego. Yeah. So we're talking now about taking accountability or finding some responsibility within yourself to acknowledge something happened and maybe take steps to fix it, whatever's involved. But there's still a difference between responsibility and fault.
Yes.
And I think that's a huge hurdle to overcome as well, because you can spin your wheels thinking it's not your fault, and choose not to take accountability or responsibility and continue to give that control to the other person whose quote unquote fault it was. Or you look past that and decide you're going to do what you can and control what you can.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I think a lot of people would prefer to acquiesce control to someone else. You know, it's short term. It's easier.
Right.
It's less painful. emotionally, psychologically, behaviorally, sometimes physically, to push it off on somebody else, because that way I can just throw up my hands and say, well, there's nothing I can do about it.
Right.
It's not my fault. It is her fault, his fault, their fault, this corporation's fault, this politician's fault, whatever. And so short term, it absolves me of action,
Yeah.
which
It's the immediate gratification of, well, it's somebody else's fault, which means I have no control. I can't do anything. Not my circus, not my monkeys. But then the long-term ramification of that is, well, you don't have any control over it. You
right,
can't impact it
right.
if you choose to think that way.
But and then it truly does become, someone else's problem,
Mhm.
someone else's, not necessarily fault, but someone else's problem, because you've just said, well, I'm not going to do anything about this because I can't.
Mhm.
Whether you can or not,
Right.
you said I'm not going to because I can't. And so now it does become somebody else's circus, somebody else's monkeys,
Yeah.
if something's going to get done about it.
Right. Well, and as small business owners, there are a lot of circuses and monkeys that you have to pick up after. That it would be so easy to just be like, well, I didn't do that. That's not my problem.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it all comes back to you.
End of the day, it's the buck stops here kind of thing. It's it's very cliche, but cliches like stereotypes exist for a reason.
Right.
And as a small business owner or somebody that is in any kind of leadership role, really, but especially small business owner, end of the day, there's nobody above that person. There's
Right.
nobody to really, because you can point down all you want,
Mhm.
but all of those people are pointing back up at you like,
Right.
okay, but I told you this, you said that, I'm following these guidelines,
Yeah.
and whether they are or they aren't, it's still up to that person to be the checks and balances to make sure that things are happening or not happening. And
Yeah.
It truly is the buck stops here.
The ownership is tough to take. It really is, because it's just so much easier to be like, well, I told them to do this and they didn't do it. And it seems very black and white and very clear, but you're not going to get anywhere with that thinking. You're not going to ever be able to stop that problem from happening again, whatever it was, whatever came up. And if you don't change something about how you communicated or what you did, then no one gets any better. There's no growth. It's got to be on you to take ownership and figure out what went wrong, what broke, and be able to move to your second plan A.
Yeah.
Because that's not going to be on those people below you necessarily. I mean,
No,
great if they are thinking that way, but it's got to come to you.
Ultimately, you do want, I do want, people that are working for me, working with me, however you want to say it,
More of working with.
that have the ability to problem solve.
Yep.
However, ultimately, it's still up to me, and when you start saying, well, I told them this, I told them that, okay, fine, whatever, but we still have a problem to solve.
Yes.
This is my big thing, and this in life, relationships, companies, self-defense, whatever. Don't come to me with problems, come to me with solutions, and then we can figure it out. But if the first thing out of somebody's mouth is, this is wrong, this needs to be fixed, this is whatever, I'm already like shutting down. I already don't want to hear it, and it's not because I don't want to take responsibility. It's because I want people to be able, just like in self-defense, because I'm never going to cover everything I need to cover
Right.
in a self-defense context. If we train for 1,000 different scenarios, for sure the 1,001st is going to present itself to someone.
Mm-hmm.
And so I haven't truly prepared them to deal with that if I haven't put them in a position where they can solve problems in real time, because I'm not going to be there to answer it, to fix it, to solve it for them. And I think in a, I hate to say corporate environment because we are so not corporate, but everybody understands what I mean when I say it.
Yeah.
And in that environment, you want people, one, with the freedom
Mm-hmm.
to think that they can, or believe, to know that they can attempt to solve problems on their own before it gets to me.
Yeah.
And then on my end, I'm immediately trying to figure out, okay, well, how do we fix this? Because I can ascribe fault, blame, whatever, after the fact, and
Sure.
not for the sake of ascribing fault or blame, but for the sake of figuring
Fixing the
out what
problem.
what truly
Yeah.
happened, and how do we make sure it doesn't happen
The
again.
long-term game.
Yes.
Yeah.
Short term,
Short term, we find the solution, we
let's
fix
deal with
it.
the
Yeah.
problem.
Well, you're great at this from a coaching standpoint, on the mats. And I want to go back to that fighting side for just a minute, because especially for those who haven't trained with you and been in their classes, they haven't experienced this. And I think if you're training with coaches who don't do this, you're really missing out and you have no idea. And that's when, a lot of times students will come to you and say, well, what if this happens? And you're thinking in the back of the head, like, that's not really what we're doing, doesn't
Right.
matter. Like, there
Right.
are those, but sometimes a student has a legitimate question, and rather than just tell them, you prompt them.
Right.
Well, what do you think? What do you feel?
Yeah.
What makes sense to you? And then you can be there and help guide it.
Based on what you know right now, what would you think might be a solution here? Again, it goes back to I don't remember where we had the conversation about critical thinking.
Yeah.
But
Episode 1, I believe, guys. Go all the way back to the beginning.
But if I just feed you answers,
Mhm.
you will never develop the ability to think critically, to problem solve. It's I think coaching, teaching 101, the way it should be, in my opinion.
Yeah.
If you're teaching a small child how to learn whatever it is,
Mhm.
you ask them questions, you want them to ask you questions.
Yes.
It's not they ask me a thing and I just immediately give them the answer, because they're never going to learn how to learn. They're never
Right.
going to understand how to seek out, solutions on their own. They will always look to externals for answers. And unfortunately, and fortunately to some degree, almost always there are external answers,
Mhm.
but they're going through the filter of somebody else.
Yes.
And if it's something that is based on my feelings or emotions or something very personally contextual, all somebody else can do is give me their opinion based on their experiences.
Mhm.
And even if I explain it to them the best that I can, they're never going to truly understand what it is I'm doing. I'm not saying don't seek advice. Absolutely, you should seek advice. You should talk to people. You should get input from other people. At the end of the day, though, that kind of where you're constantly seeking confirmation or validation or whatever from somebody else, again, it kind of it gives you an out.
Yeah.
Well, if something goes wrong,
it wasn't me.
It wasn't me. Yeah. This is what, Amber told me this is what she would do. And I tried it and it blew up in my face. In another episode, I said, I've never made a bad decision, I don't think, because I had too much information, but I've probably made plenty because I didn't have enough.
Yes.
And so I think this can be similar in that I do want more information. And I do want to hear what other people have to say. But at some point, I just have to do it. I just have to go. Yes. I just have to take action, and this is where you and there's a lot of duality there, because I'm very much
go.
Let's go. Let's get it done. The conversation is we're past that, let's act.
Yeah.
And you are very much, okay, but what about?
I have a lot of questions, guys. I like to know exactly what's going on, or try to anyway, at least at the get-go. Anyway, we're going to table that conversation super fast. I'm going to get on my own little soapbox, because this is exactly what we're talking about, where, yes, seek advice, and you can learn jujitsu and kickboxing and different things online and through videos, but at some point you have to touch hands and do it, and there's not much of a stronger teacher than learning through experience. And so I've seen an influx of videos, specifically jiu-jitsu, just that's what's on my feed. Don't at me, blame the algorithm. So I'm going for jiu-jitsu here, where here are 3 things white belts should never do.
Yeah.
And if I made those videos, I would be like, here are 3 things white belts should do right now. Learn fast.
Yeah.
You reach your arms for this, you're going to get armbarred. You're going to be disappointed. You're going to learn really quickly why you don't do that.
Yeah.
Take somebody's back, cross your feet. You're going to learn really quickly. And you can learn it now. And you're going to have a much stronger understanding, to the where when you're in that position again and you go to do that thing, your body's going to go, oh, last time that was really bad.
Yeah.
It's not going to go, oh, remember that random video you watched at 3 a.m. between those other 700 other videos you were watching at 3 a.m.
Right. Yeah. And, I mean, we've had this conversation where it's like, okay, once you have really good understanding and ownership of the rules, you can start to break them.
Yes.
You know,
Ownership of the rules.
yeah, it's weird.
Interesting. Ah.
And I say that in my classes often. It's not just about knowing the rules, it's about owning them. It's about really understanding. Memorizing a set of rules is useless. It's like memorizing a set of techniques, collecting techniques. It doesn't help me at all. I need to understand why. And the experience is where I'm going to understand that. Why do I not cross my ankles? But sometimes I can.
Yes.
At white belt, probably not. But why?
Right.
And somebody can tell you, but you need to experience it, because the reality is I could cross my ankles if I shrimped out from underneath them a little bit and put both of my ankles on their hip.
Yeah.
Like moving my ankles 6 inches is the difference between maybe
can I do it or not?
Yeah. So again, if we're talking about ownership, I think ownership of rules, of guidelines is super important, because that's where the problem solving actually starts happening. Because now you can start working outside of the rules, outside of the guidelines, outside of, what everybody says do or don't do.
When we started this conversation, we were on the side of getting to the point where we start taking ownership, and we were talking about ego and blame and fault. And the words around those were emotions and feelings a lot more. And now that we moved into taking ownership, we're using the word understanding a lot more. Making someone else responsible for your emotions or feelings is probably one of the quickest ways we lose control.
Yes.
I would say.
Yes. And generally speaking, when we react rashly, it's an emotional response. It's based on how I'm feeling in this moment. And a lot of times, we'll say, well, you made me feel this way, or, no, I can't make you feel anyway.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to hear that. Nobody.
No. Oh, I would lose my mind right now.
Nobody wants to hear that. But the reality is, what you do with the information I give you, completely up to you. I could say a thing.
Which, of course, doesn't mean you should just run around and hurt people's feelings and ruin people's lives just to do it.
I mean, unless you're a Gen Xer, that's just the way we grew up. Like, I don't like, that was just how you did it.
How does this work?
How does what work? Well,
let's not.
I don't say 80% of the things that go through my head.
Oh, look at that!
Look at that. Weird.
I say those 80%. I say all the things that run through my head. You said specifically, you make me feel this way. And that is something you hear a lot. And not to be too heavy about how great our relationship is, but I'm happy to be past a lot of the younger getting started in emotions and relationships and understanding how to control your own feelings side of things. Because I'm sure I have said that so many times. You make me feel this.
Everybody has. That. I mean, again, it's part of the process. It's part of learning in life through experience, just like crossing your ankles. When it's okay to do that, when it's not.
Yep.
And if my coach tells me it's okay to cross your ankles here and something happens, it's still not your coach's fault.
Right.
They gave you information based on a certain context, a certain time and place and situation. The number of times that I've taught a thing and somebody's looked at me like, well, it doesn't work. No, I promise you it works.
It maybe didn't work for you right there, but it works.
Right. You tried to do the thing at the wrong time, or you didn't have a great understanding of why it sometimes everything works and everything doesn't work in our world.
Oh yeah.
And honestly, it's that way in most things.
I was about to say it could be expanded.
So the idea of, well, that doesn't work, it's like, no, that's you again.
Yeah.
Putting the blame, fault, whatever on somebody else because you weren't able to execute in that moment in time.
Yeah. So I'm gonna stick on the feelings and the "you make me" statement, and this is a direct quote from I don't know how many seasons or episodes of Love Is Blind.
Okay.
But it is one of the guys. We have a very interesting relationship where we do a lot of super important and meaningful things. And then sometimes we get home at the end of the day and we want to watch the most meaningless things on the planet.
Again, it's the duality.
The
We
duality.
talked about this in, was it the last episode?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't think you can redline at
Yeah.
ego and accountability all the time.
Right.
At some point you need Love is Blind.
and that is where we are.
Yeah.
And so one of the lines I hear a ton on there is, "You make me want to be a better person."
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Ugh. There are plenty that I hate, and I'm sure Ryan had like about 20 running through his head as I was saying that to see which one I was going to get to. But that one, like, that you can't put that on somebody you met a week ago and have just seen now face to face, and you're like, "You make me want to be a better person." Like,
Yes.
that's a lot.
Yeah.
But also, it's not on them.
Right.
That is not. You should not give somebody that much control over you. They're the only reason you want to be a better person.
Well, I mean, that's the whole thing with emotional responses in general.
Mm-hmm.
I am giving my control to someone else, and we talk about this in the self-defense context a good bit on the self kind of protection side, the preemptive side. If I can't control my own emotions, there is no way I can control external variables. There's no way I can control things outside of me if I can't control what's going on inside of me.
Yeah. For instance, if somebody is in my face and yelling and screaming and angry, if my immediate jump to is to match to that level and be yelling and screaming and angry,
Yes.
we're not going to be able to de-escalate that.
Oh, it's going to do the opposite.
Right. It's just going to keep building.
Yeah.
But if I can, even if I'm scared and terrified and I want to scream and yell, if I can keep a calmer head
Yes.
and look for an actual solution, like we talked about at the beginning of this, I have a chance of being able to get them calm too.
Right.
Without saying calm down.
It's the duck in water.
Yeah.
You watch a duck and you see him on the surface and he's gliding along the surface and it looks like there's no effort being made. He's barely breaking the surface of the water, very few ripples. But if you look underneath, he's kicking like hell. And sometimes, that might be us, especially in a potentially violent situation where on the inside, I might be like going 1,000 miles per hour. But I need to be able to control that in a way that on the outside, I'm not emoting that. You're not picking up on it, because all that will serve to do is escalate things.
Right. Yeah, you look at that duck, you don't know what they look like they're cool, but they might be kicking a lot. They might be coasting. They might be, you don't know. They're able to just show that.
How many times have you been around dogs that can pick up on different energies from people?
People are, and by people I mean me, are so fast to trust their dog because their left ear twitched, which means that person has some bad intent.
Right.
And then they don't trust their own intuition. I know this is a tangent, but it all circles back, so I'm going with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So control is coming out a lot, and I'm going to lead us down a path it'll circle back. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, emphasizes acknowledging cognitive distortions.
Okay.
And essentially, there's maybe 10 to 15 that are really common that we see in people. And this is calling back, again, all the way to episode 1 in terms of your narrative identity. What your internal dialogue is saying about what's happening externally. And one of those distortions is called the control fallacy, where you're giving too much power or control to the other person. So there's two sides of this. So one, where your behaviors and actions are strictly a result of other people. Okay, yeah, maybe I hit that car, but it's because they stopped fast and this was happening and somebody called me and like it's all everybody else's fault.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've done a pretty good job talking about that. The other side, though, is interesting too, because it's where your behaviors and actions control other people's lives.
Okay.
Well, if I don't do this, then my husband's not going to be happy.
Right.
Or if where you think that what you do and how you do it and everything is what makes somebody else happy, and you take on that responsibility, and that can be just as damaging.
Yeah.
So knowing it's not just about taking ownership, you still have to know where you should take ownership of things.
Yes. Well, and I think sometimes obviously there could be some deep-seated things going on there based on somebody's background, history,
Sure.
whatever.
Yeah, well, all of this, we are talking about,
Yes.
therapy
Yeah.
essentially.
But also, like, it's really easy to start, again, based on how you grew up, people that were around you, whatever. It's really easy to start ascribing other people's actions to the way that you are behaving,
Yes, yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's like it's the reverse of what we said earlier. It's like, I can't make you feel a certain way. I
Right.
can't.
I
That's a
can't make
choice
you
you're
happy.
making, right? And so if I can't make you angry, upset, if I can't make you depressed, if I can't make you whatever, then I necessarily can't make you happy either. I can do things
Hmm.
that lend to that and support that, and on the other side, I can do things that support to you being that lend support to you being unhappy or depressed or whatever.
Of course.
But at the end of the day, barring some sort of mental diagnosis, those things are on you.
Yeah.
It's not my job to make somebody else happy, no more than it is my job to make somebody else sad or depressed.
Right.
Now, obviously, we can influence that, and the people,
Sure.
and the closer that you are to
somebody.
someone, the more influence you're going to have.
The more committed they get, the more you can manipulate them.
Yes.
Right back there.
Yes.
Well, so using blame is also looked at as a cognitive distortion, and clearly these things overlap pretty well together. Assigning guilt or responsibility, especially over how you feel, it's a thought pattern where, and it might not even be someone you're connected to. You see something on social media and it's a mom up at 4 a.m. making breakfasts and lunches and dinners and packing and exercising and working on her small business or whatever, and your thought pattern is, I'm not doing enough. She makes me feel bad about myself, those kinds of
Right.
things, where that's not on her.
No.
Even if she posted thinking, I'm going to make some mom feel like crap today,
Right.
it's not on her.
Right.
That you watched that video and that's how your thoughts came about. You get control over how you feel.
Yeah. But also, like, she doesn't get extra credit for those things either.
Yeah.
Those are things that she has decided.
Right.
She has made the choice to do. Again, it's like, you don't get extra credit for waking up at 4:30 in the morning and doing your little workout. I don't. If that's what you've decided to do, awesome,
Good.
great.
Yeah.
If you have decided that your lot in life is to take care of all these things and all these people, fine. Again, like, and this is not meant to be derogatory in any way. This is understanding that the way we live is, by and large, our choice,
Yeah.
And if somebody's posting all these things that they're doing, awesome for them, if that's the way they want to live.
Right.
But it doesn't mean anything for me.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing.
So we choose the way we want to live. We also choose how we perceive the world and what's going on around us. If you think the world is out to get you, the world is going to be out to get you. That's how you're going to view it. That's how you're going to see it.
Yeah. Oh, I think, especially in social media, you'll see a good bit of that.
Mm-hmm.
A good bit of people, and I think on some level they truly believe that everything that is happening to them is some grand conspiracy, some grand scheme,
Mm-hmm.
some grand otherworldly force has conspired against them, and that is why they are not successful, or why they were late, or why they had that wreck, or why they lost their job, or why they're getting divorced, or whatever. As opposed to, well, I made this decision and this decision, and I didn't do this thing that I probably should have done. And because, I mean, realistically, who wants to do that? Who
Right.
wants to sit
Right,
back
of
and
course.
think about all the things that they should have or should have not done? It's cleaner to be like, doesn't matter what I do, man.
Yeah.
The world is just out to get me.
Yeah. And the downward spiral that you go into when you, okay.
I got news for everybody out there, okay?
Uh-oh.
None of you and none of us are that important.
No, you're right.
Like, you talk about ego. think about how self-important you have to be to believe that the entire world, that some sentient being out there, wherever, in the ether, thinks you're so important that they're going to put out so much energy and effort into making your life suck. How does that make sense?
Really important.
Really important. And I would imagine that none of us really fit that bill, you know? Like, how does that even make sense?
Don't bring logic into this. This is feelings. I feel like everything is something else's fault. And then my feelings on those feelings are also bad. And so then I feel bad about myself with those feelings on those feelings on those feelings. And it's just a giant snowball. Yeah. And breaking that thought pattern. Obviously, there are steps to everything. Hopefully listening to this podcast is a step. If you're sitting there thinking about, oh, you know what? I'm 10 pounds overweight and I was blaming, not having time and my work schedule and this, that, and the other. And you recognize that's my thought pattern. That's a step.
Right.
And then the next step might be inserting a 10-minute walk or whatever. And it takes time. It takes a lot of acknowledgement and practice, but you can get out of that spiral.
Yeah. You have to, first of all, you have to recognize that there's a problem, and then you have to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise the spiral continues.
Yes.
And with emotions, it's really easy to let it run amok.
Yes.
The thing that I've seen in social media a good bit, maybe not as recently, I haven't been quite as bombastic in my social profile in the past few years, but
not yet.
There was a time where, I would post videos that would get a lot of engagement, a lot positive, a lot negative. And many, many times I would, one of my comments to certain people would be, look, I'm responsible for the words that I say, not the emotions that you attach to them.
Yes.
And that response usually elicited one of two responses. They either got more emotional and blamed me for antagonizing them, or, and this was rarer, but it did happen, people did start to recognize, hey, you know what? He actually didn't say that. It was my bias that led me to think that was there when it really wasn't.
In the tenure of our working relationship and our courtship of sorts, I suppose.
Okay.
One of the biggest things I had to really realize and understand with you that I've never really seen from other people is you say exactly what you mean.
Yes.
And whatever a lot of times I'll listen, you say a thing and I'm like, okay, well, maybe by and it's just, no, stop. Exactly what he said he meant. So think back, Amber. What exactly did he say? Okay. Pretty sure that was it. Gosh, I hope that was it. So that's exactly what he meant. All right, moving on.
Yes. That's why when I'll say a thing or I text a thing and you ask me a question, I'm like, what did
I
say?
My brain runs amok. And I recognize that. And that's one step. All right. We have covered the spectrum here: emotions, feelings, fighting, control, responsibility, fault, all of those sorts of things. I'm going to tie in one more interesting ownership thought process. And I think this came about predominantly in our lives, working lives, when we brought on Daniel Shaw as part of the Active Killer Defense Program.
Okay.
And we brought him on to supply the armed side of things into some of the trauma care. He has a vast knowledge and experience around firearms. I'm just going to say he's done everything.
Yeah.
We'll link to his profile. You can go check him out.
He's done a lot. He's actually in North Carolina mountains right now, helping with recovery and whatever.
Yeah, from Hurricane Helene. Yeah. So when he came in and was talking to us about what the armed program should look like and that sort of thing, he emphasized ownership a good bit in terms of ownership of each round you fire or that's fired while you're controlling your weapon.
Yeah.
And we look at that too from an unarmed side when you are getting hands-on with this person, the weapon arm, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
he just tied it together with the weapons side as well. If I take a shot and I miss, I am still responsible for where that round goes.
Yeah.
And you have not just the legal ramifications, but you have moral and ethical to consider as well.
Yeah.
And you need to take ownership of everyone's safety in that environment. And it's a big ask. And that's why we don't take that program lightly at all, where we're asking you to be your own bodyguard, take ownership of the situation, of the problem, and start taking ownership of people's safety.
You're going to need to bleep that phrase out.
What did I say?
Because there's a certain self-defense instructor that will probably try to sue us.
Understand. Okay, I'll go back and find it. Thanks. Future Amber, that's your problem.
It's funny. That's not the quote that I thought you were going to give from Daniel. There's another thing that he says or has said in some of those courses where he says, look, he's talking about when he's doing the armed portion, he's talking about, look, you don't have to like guns. You don't have to believe in guns, whatever. He says something along the lines of, you don't have to believe, or you can not believe in traffic, but if you go out and play in it, traffic will believe in you.
I left that one for you.
Okay. I mean, but it's the same thing, or the same idea. It's like, well, regardless of what your emotions about this thing are, regardless of what your feelings or your beliefs or whatever are, that will not change the facts.
Yeah. That's a hard pill to swallow.
Traffic still exists.
Yeah.
Guns still exist. And so I can come to a thing with all of my biases and all of my filters and all of my life experiences and all of my wants and beliefs and whatever. However, the facts will remain, and they don't have to scream loudly. Facts just are. So, yeah.
You can bury them in different ways, and we actually have an episode coming out soon about that. But the facts are what they are.
All right, are we done?
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
No, it's fine. I want to talk about second plan A for a second.
I'm about to close it out
because it'll tie into some of this stuff anyway.
Cool.
All right. I want to make sure everybody understands that why, if you don't take our classes, you may not have heard this terminology or this phraseology. We use it in the self-defense circles as, look, I'm trying. I had this thing in my mind that I was going to do. I was going to try. The circumstances changed. The context changed. Somebody moved a little bit that I didn't expect, or I moved a little bit, or I tripped, and that, whatever it is. And that necessitates me doing a different thing. And I think it's really important to think of these things in terms of plan A, second plan A, third plan A, whatever, because it's not that one is better than another. As soon as we ascribe the terminology plan B, the connotation there is that it's lesser than.
Right.
Well, I'm doing this because
I would have rather.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And it's not that I would have rather had. It's in that moment in time, that was the thing that I needed. 3 seconds later, I needed a different thing. And that's my second plan A, because right now, this is the best thing. And I think that can apply to life and job and whatever else. I've heard Eli in his classes say a number of times, if it's not there, I don't need it. Mm-hmm. The idea of, well, if I can't get to that arm, then I don't need it. Yeah. Because I think it's a similar thought process in that if in my head I think I need that arm, then I'm going to chase that arm, and maybe I give up. Maybe I lose control of the other arm, right, or I lose my balance, my posture, whatever, because I'm chasing a thing that I don't really need. Right. And so the idea of second plan A, again, is that not that there aren't a hierarchy of probably best options for a certain situation. It's about situations changing and us being willing to move and evolve with it.
Right. Being flexible enough to realize the situation is different and choosing a different avenue.
Yes.
Plans being useless and planning being invaluable.
Yes. It's not the plan, it's the planning. That's where training really, really matters, and having ownership of rules and ownership of principles and concepts, because that's going to allow you to problem solve in real time. You won't have a necessarily attachment to any one thing or any one method. you're going to understand that as circumstances change, it requires me to now solve a new problem. And it's not that one is better or worse. This is where I am right now. And I shouldn't be perseverating on where I just was.
Right.
Because that, in our context, that gets you killed.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's gone.
Yeah.
Just like this podcast. I don't care at all that we have moved on to a new name.
Mm-hmm.
In my training centers, I think I've been through 5 names, and I don't lament that one bit. As what we were doing changed, as the market changed, the demographics changed, as the geography changed,
society changed.
Yeah, we changed. That's smart.
Right.
Like that. And I'm not saying I'm smart. I'm saying I have an understanding of, if you don't evolve, the world won't care that you didn't. It will leave you behind. It's just like traffic.
Yeah.
You can not believe in traffic, but if you go play in it, it will believe in you. You can hold fast to whatever your idea of ideal is, but the world keeps moving. And if you're not willing to move with it, you will get left behind.
And you started talking about reps in terms of experience and training and that sort of thing, but it's the 10,000 hours idea.
Yeah.
You put in the work, the time of doing anything, and you run into problems and obstacles and you get through them, around them, above them, whatever, and it gives you the necessary experience you need to be ready to shift and change.
Yes.
And the more you experience it, the better you get at shifting and changing, the quicker it happens.
The more you fail, the more you get shut down, the more brick walls you run into, the better you get at avoiding brick walls, or going through them, or over them, or around them, or whatever it is. Not just standing there and looking at this brick wall like, well, shit, it's a brick wall.
Somebody else should come move this out of my way.
Hey, come get this for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, that's our look at ego versus accountability, the challenge of taking ownership. If you didn't enjoy this podcast, just keep it to yourself. Stay off of social media and go on with your life as usual. If you did enjoy this discussion, please leave us those 5-star reviews, turn on your downloads for Spotify, follow, share, subscribe, and join the conversation on social media.
Remember, it's Second Plan A podcast now.
Thanks for listening to Second Plan A, and we look forward to growing with you next time.
Thanks, everybody.